When a black tech CEO walked into her own luxury hotel and was told, "We don't serve your kind," she didn't argue, didn't yell, she just made one phone call, and what happened next silenced the entire lobby. The Grand Plaza Hotel in downtown Atlanta was bustling with its usual Friday night crowd. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light on marble floors where Atlanta's elite conducted business, celebrated deals, and displayed their wealth with casual confidence. The air hummed with the familiar symphony of luxury. Soft conversations about yacht purchases, the gentle clink of champagne glasses, and the subtle rustle of designer clothing. But tonight, the usual rhythm would be shattered by an encounter that would be recorded, shared, and viewed by millions. Her name was Keisha Williams, and she looked nothing like what the hotel staff expected from someone requesting their most expensive accommodations. She wore torn jeans, scuffed sneakers, and an oversized tech conference hoodie that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a worn leather messenger bag that looked like it had survived countless cross-country flights. The irony was, just 12 hours earlier, Keisha had been sitting in a boardroom in Silicon Valley, closing a deal that would make her company the primary technology contractor for 3 federal agencies. The contract was worth $200 million over 5 years, and it had taken 18 months of presentations, security clearances, and negotiations to secure it. She had flown directly from that meeting to Atlanta, where she was scheduled to present the quarterly results to her own board of directors the next morning. TechVision Solutions had grown from a garage startup to a company employing over 300 people, with offices in 6 cities and contracts spanning both private and government sectors. What nobody in that lobby knew was that Keisha Williams was worth $47 million. She was the founder and CEO of TechVision Solutions, a company that had just secured a $200 million federal contract, and she owned 80% of the hotel where she was about to be humiliated. As Keisha approached the marble reception desk, she could feel the familiar weight of assumptions settling around her. The young receptionist, Ashley Morrison, looked up with a professional smile that immediately faltered when she saw who was approaching. Ashley had been working at the Grand Plaza for 6 months, and she had learned to categorize guests within seconds of seeing them. The casual clothes, the tired appearance, the messenger bag instead of luxury luggage, everything about this woman suggested someone who was either lost, confused, or attempting to access services she couldn't afford. Behind Ashley, other hotel staff had begun to notice the interaction. The concierge glanced over from his station, the bell captain slowed his movements, and even some of the well-dressed guests in the lobby had begun to take notice of what was unfolding at the front desk. "I'd like to check into the penthouse suite," Keisha said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and million-dollar negotiations. Ashley's smile completely disappeared. The penthouse suite was the hotel's crown jewel, 3,000 square feet of luxury, with a private terrace, marble bathrooms, and a view that commanded the entire Atlanta skyline. It cost $2,000 per night, and was typically reserved for Fortune 500 CEOs, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. "The penthouse? That's $2,000 per night," Ashley said, her voice carrying across the marble space loud enough for nearby guests to overhear. "That's fine. I'm familiar with your rates," Keisha replied calmly. Ashley's fingers moved across her keyboard, but her eyes remained fixed on Keisha, rather than her screen. She wasn't actually checking availability. She had already decided this woman couldn't afford their premium accommodations. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any availability in our premium suites," Ashley said, not bothering to hide the lie. Keisha had stayed in this hotel dozens of times over the past 5 years, always in the same penthouse suite, always with flawless service. She knew the accommodation was rarely booked on weeknights, and she could see the uncertainty in Ashley's eyes. "Could you please check your system again?" Keisha asked politely. "I stay here regularly." The suggestion that this woman was a regular guest seemed to irritate Ashley further. In her mind, regular guests wore tailored suits, carried designer luggage, and arrived in luxury vehicles with personal assistants in tow. "Ma'am, I can assure you, I've checked our availability thoroughly," Ashley replied, her voice gaining confidence as she sensed support from other staff members who had begun gathering nearby. "That won't be necessary," came a sharp voice from behind the desk. Richard Sterling emerged from the back office, clipboard in hand, radiating authority. At 45, Sterling had spent 15 years in luxury hospitality, and he prided himself on maintaining what he called standards. One look at Keisha, and Sterling made his judgment. "Miss, I understand you're interested in our penthouse suite," Sterling said, his voice loud enough for nearby guests to overhear, "but that accommodation is reserved for our established clientele. Perhaps something more affordable would suit your needs better." The insult was delivered with professional courtesy, but it was an insult nonetheless. Keisha felt every conversation in the lobby slow down as guests turned to watch the confrontation unfolding at the front desk. "I can afford your penthouse," Keisha replied calmly, reaching into her messenger bag. She pulled out a black American Express Centurion card, the kind of credit card with no spending limit, available only to people who charge more than $350,000 annually. Sterling glanced at the card dismissively, but his expression suggested he was looking at something distasteful rather than impressive. "Miss, we see cards like this all the time, and unfortunately, many of them turn out to be questionable. We've had significant issues with people using payment methods that don't belong to them or that have been flagged by fraud protection services." The accusation was delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who had never been challenged on such assumption. Keisha felt the familiar burn of discrimination that had followed her throughout her career. In venture capital meetings where investors questioned her technical knowledge, in conferences where people assumed she was someone's assistant, in business dinners where servers handed her the check, someone else at the table. "Are you suggesting my credit card is stolen?" she asked. Her voice still controlled, but with an edge that made several guests pause their conversation. "I'm not suggesting anything specific," Sterling replied, his voice growing more confident as he sensed an audience forming around them. "I'm simply stating our policy. We need to verify the authenticity of high-limit payment methods before processing premium reservations. It's standard procedure for certain situations." The phrase "certain situations" hung in the air like toxic smoke. Everyone within earshot understood the implication, even if Sterling was careful not to state it explicitly. By now, the confrontation had drawn significant attention throughout the lobby. A well-dressed couple waiting for the elevator had stopped to watch, phones discreetly recording. The concierge had paused his conversation with another guest. Even the bartender from the adjacent lounge had emerged to observe the unfolding drama. Keisha could feel dozens of eyes focused on her, transforming what should have been a routine check-in into a public spectacle. She recognized the familiar sensation of being put on display, of having her worth questioned in front of strangers who would judge her based on assumptions rather than facts. "I can provide additional identification if that would help resolve your concerns," Keisha offered, though she could see in Sterling's expression that no amount of documentation would change his fundamental assumptions about who she was. "Ma'am, this isn't just about identification," Sterling replied, his voice carrying across the marble lobby. "This is about ensuring that our guests understand the caliber of establishment they're entering. The Grand Plaza maintains certain..." The word standards was delivered with particular emphasis, ensuring that everyone listening understood its implications. But Sterling wasn't finished. The audience seemed to embolden him, and what had started as professional skepticism was evolving into something more personal and cruel. "Look," he continued, his voice carrying across the marble lobby with the confidence of someone who believed he had the moral high ground. "I'm trying to save you significant embarrassment here. This establishment caters to Atlanta's business elite, CEOs, investors, diplomats, entertainment industry executives. Our typical guests arrive with personal assistants, security details, and corporate expense accounts that most people couldn't comprehend." He gestured dismissively at her appearance. "We have dress codes, behavioral expectations, and social standards that ensure our other guests can enjoy their stay without disruptions. The Grand Plaza isn't a youth hostel or a budget chain where casual attire is acceptable. We maintain a level of sophistication that requires guests who understand and respect our atmosphere." The lecture was delivered with the kind of casual condescension that comes from someone who has never had their own assumptions challenged. Keisha stood in the center of the lobby, surrounded by guests who were now openly recording her public humiliation, being treated like someone who had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. "I understand your concerns about maintaining standards," Keisha replied, her voice still controlled despite the building frustration. "But I can assure you that I'm familiar with luxury accommodations and appropriate behavior in professional settings." Sterling's laugh was harsh and carried across the marble space. "Ma'am, with all due respect, familiarity and actual experience are very different things. Our penthouse suite guests are typically featured in Forbes and Fortune magazine. They own multiple properties, manage billion-dollar portfolios, and travel exclusively in private aircraft. These aren't people who, dressed like they're heading to a college campus." The insult was layered and deliberate. Sterling wasn't just questioning her ability to afford the room, he was systematically dismantling her credibility, her professionalism, and her right to be treated with basic dignity. "Perhaps," he continued, warming to his theme as he noticed the growing audience, "you might be more comfortable at one of the extended-stay properties downtown. They offer weekly rates that might be more manageable, and their dress code is considerably more flexible." Ashley, emboldened by her manager's performance, decided to add her own contribution to the humiliation. "We could call you a taxi if you need directions to more appropriate accommodations," she offered with false helpfulness. The cruelty was breathtaking. Two hotel employees were systematically destroying a guest's dignity in front of dozens of witnesses, transforming a simple request for accommodation into a public exhibition of class-based discrimination. The final phrase hung in the air like toxic smoke. Everyone in the lobby could see exactly what was happening now. "People like me?" Keisha asked quietly. "You know exactly what I mean," Sterling said. "This hotel serves a very specific clientele, and frankly, you don't fit our demographic." The cruelty was breathtaking. Keisha Williams stood in the lobby of a hotel she owned, being denied service because someone couldn't imagine that a black woman in casual clothes could afford luxury accommodations. "I understand exactly what you mean," Keisha said, her voice growing stronger. "And I want you to understand something too. My name is Keisha Williams. I'm the founder and CEO of Tech Vision Solutions. I'm worth $47 million, and I own 80% of this hotel." Sterling's laugh was harsh. "Right. And I suppose you're going to tell me you're some kind of tech mogul who just happens to dress like a college student." "Actually, that's exactly what I'm telling you," Keisha replied. "But since you don't seem to believe me," she pulled out her phone and dialed a number, putting it on speaker so everyone in the lobby could hear. "Williams Legal Group. This is Catherine Morrison." "Catherine, this is Keisha. I'm standing in the lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel, and I need you to confirm something for the hotel manager." "Of course, Keisha. What do you need?" "Could you please confirm my ownership stake in the Grand Plaza Hotel for Mr. Sterling here?" There was a brief pause. "Certainly. Ms. Williams owns 80% of the Grand Plaza Hotel through KW Property. She purchased the initial stake in 2019 and became the majority owner in 2021. Is there some kind of problem?" The lobby fell completely silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The only sound was the gentle hum of air conditioning and the distant murmur from the hotel bar. Sterling's face had gone completely pale. The clipboard in his hands trembled slightly. "No problem," Keisha said, ending the call. "Just a case of mistaken identity." But Keisha wasn't finished. She had just proven she owned the building everyone was standing in, and now she was going to demonstrate exactly what that meant. "Now that we've established ownership," she continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just revealed they controlled everything around them, "I want to understand exactly what training you've received regarding discrimination and customer service." Sterling stood frozen, finally grasping the magnitude of what he had done. He hadn't just insulted a potential guest, he had publicly humiliated the owner of the hotel. "Ms. Williams, I sincerely apologize," he stammered. "If I had known who you were—" "If you had known what?" Keisha interrupted. "If you had known I owned this hotel, you would have treated me with respect." But because you assumed I couldn't afford to stay here, it was acceptable to humiliate me in front of your guests. The question exposed everything wrong with his apology. He wasn't sorry for his assumptions. He was sorry for targeting someone with power. The crowd that had gathered to witness the confrontation watched in stunned silence as the woman they had seen dismissed and insulted revealed herself to be the person who controlled their entire environment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Keisha said, addressing everyone in the lobby, "my name is Keisha Williams. I'm the founder and CEO of TechVision Solutions, and I own this hotel. What you've witnessed tonight is exactly why we need to examine our assumptions about who belongs in spaces of luxury and success." Several guests began applauding. Others approached to apologize for not intervening. Many exchanged business cards with her, suddenly recognizing her as someone they wanted to know. But the revelation was just the beginning of the consequences. Keisha pulled out her phone again. "This is Keisha Williams. I need to schedule an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." Then she made another call. "Michelle, I need you to contact every business journal in Atlanta. I have a story about discrimination in hospitality that needs to be told." The videos that guests had recorded were already being uploaded to social media. Within hours, Grand Plaza discrimination would be trending nationwide. "Mr. Sterling," Keisha said, turning back to the man who had started this confrontation, "your employment here is terminated immediately. You'll be hearing from our legal department. Ms. Morrison," she continued, addressing Ashley, "you'll be attending mandatory sensitivity training." As Keisha finally made her way to the elevator, she reflected on what had just happened. She had built her fortune by proving people wrong when they underestimated her, but she never expected to have to prove her worth in a building she owned. The penthouse suite was exactly as she remembered, spacious, elegant, with a commanding view of Atlanta's skyline. But tonight, the familiar luxury was overshadowed by exhaustion from having to defend her basic right to dignity. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends who had already seen the videos. News outlets were requesting interviews. The story was becoming national news, but for Keisha, the most important outcome wasn't the media attention or the viral videos. It was knowing she had stood up for herself and every black woman who had been underestimated because of assumptions about who they were supposed to be. The next morning's board meeting would implement comprehensive diversity training, new hiring practices, and policies designed to ensure that what had happened to her would never happen to anyone else at any property she owned. The incident would become a case study in business schools, demonstrating the cost of discrimination and the importance of treating every customer with dignity. Sterling's career in hospitality was effectively over. The video would follow him to every job interview, every background check, every professional reference for years to come. He had become the face of everything wrong with assumptive service and discriminatory practices in the luxury hospitality industry. Ashley would complete her mandatory sensitivity training and keep her job, but she would never again make assumptions about a guest's ability to pay based on their appearance. The incident had taught her a lesson that no amount of customer service training could have provided. But the most significant change would be in Keisha herself. She had spent years building her company and accumulating wealth, partly as protection against exactly this kind of treatment. She had believed that success would insulate her from the assumptions and prejudices that had followed her throughout her life. Tonight had proven that no amount of money could completely shield her from discrimination, but it had also demonstrated that success could provide the power to demand accountability and create change. The videos of her confrontation with Sterling would be viewed over 15 million times in the first week, sparking nationwide conversations about discrimination in luxury services, assumptions based on appearance, and the intersection of race and wealth in America. But perhaps most importantly, her story would inspire countless other black women and men who had faced similar treatment to stand up for themselves and demand the dignity they deserve. 6 months later, Keisha would be invited to speak at the International Hotel Association's annual conference about diversity and inclusion in hospitality. She would share her story with hotel managers and executives from around the world, helping to create industry-wide changes in how luxury establishments trained their staff and treated their guests. The Grand Plaza Hotel would become a model for inclusive luxury hospitality, implementing programs that other hotel chains would copy. The incident that had started as a moment of humiliation would become a catalyst for positive change throughout the industry. Sterling would eventually find work at a budget motel chain, where his assumptions about guests' financial capabilities would be less devastating. But he would never again work in luxury hospitality, and he would carry the weight of that night with him for the rest of his career. Sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger or revenge. It's success, so undeniable, and influence so far-reaching that it forces entire industries to reconsider their assumptions about worth, belonging, and respect. Keisha Williams had proven that intelligence, achievement, and value couldn't be determined by appearance, and her story would continue to inspire people to challenge their own assumptions about who deserves dignity and respect. As she settled into her penthouse suite that night, looking out over the Atlanta skyline she had helped shape through her investments and business decisions, Keisha reflected on the evening's events. She had been humiliated, but she had also been empowered. She had been underestimated, but she had proven her worth beyond any doubt. Most importantly, she had stood not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been judged by their appearance rather than their character, their achievements, or their worth as human beings. The lesson wasn't just about racial discrimination or economic assumptions, it was about the fundamental human dignity that every person deserves, regardless of how they look, how they dress, or what others assume about their circumstances. If you found this story eye-opening, share it. You never know who needs to hear this lesson about assumptions, respect, and the courage to demand the dignity we all deserve.